Hi, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Hi, I'm John from STB and I oversee the Southeast Asia portfolio. So this afternoon, we're going to focus a bit on the Southeast Asian markets. There are two presentations here. We will start with the first presentation by Crescent Rating on a survey research piece that they've done jointly with MasterCard. Right, this is something that they do annually, but this year I think they're focusing a bit more on COVID. There's some valuable insights that they will be sharing with us. And then this will be followed by the second presentation, and that is STB Southeast Asia Regional Officers' work that they have been doing. Although things have come to a standstill in terms of visitors from Southeast Asia over the past 7 months, the Southeast Asia team has actually been working and doing some interesting projects and initiatives within the market. Then we will then share with you all, right, some of our plans working towards the time when the markets can Singapore can reopen to the Southeast Asia markets. So I will start by passing the presentation to Fazal. Fazal, you want to start by introducing Crescent Rating to the committee here?
Right. Okay. Can you hear me, all of you? John, can you hear me? I think I'm still muted. Hold on.
Fazal, I think you're on mute.
Okay. The control. Okay, it's here. Sorry. Okay, done. Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So yeah, Fazal here. Thanks for inviting me, John and the team. So I'm from Crescent Rating. Crescent Rating. We had the last almost 12 years. We have been focusing mainly on the Muslim market. And we have, apart from things that we do for the Muslim market, we also have been working with MasterCard in releasing many reports. And this is, as John just mentioned, this is a sort of unique report. Most of our reports are, this is the 18th report that we are releasing with them. Most of the reports are basically on the Muslim market. So this is the sort of first report. We have gone slightly beyond the Muslim market because of the current state of affairs. So I'm going to sort of take you through quickly some of the findings of this report. And yeah. So John, can you see my slides behind me?
Yes, the slides are clear.
Okay, wonderful. So let me get this. Okay. So as I said, this is the 18th report where we have been doing reports with MasterCard in since 2015. So this report, just to very quickly summarize the report, and I'll go a little bit into some of the details of these. So in terms of observations coming out of the report, I think there are three observations. One is what we call scenario planning, and as I think everybody knows, there are so many unknowns as we look at the future. That's why scenario planning is key, I think, especially for SMEs who are dependent on cash flows and liquidity. I think that's one of the things. So we tried to use the report, which is very different from any other reports that we have done, in terms of developing models and tools, frameworks to help them start planning, because it's crucial that they plan, because things keep moving almost on a daily basis. So unless they plan, their survival becomes really an issue. The second area of the report, so we used these models and tools in the report, and we tested out ASEAN numbers, since we are sitting in ASEAN here. And what comes out is that ASEAN collaboration, especially from on the Singapore context, will be very key, because as we look to the near future, everything says it is all about domestic and short haul. At best, maybe medium haul markets. Long haul markets are going to be a long-term recovery. So that's the second area which comes out, and I'm going to take you through some numbers in that. And this third one was not in the report, but through the report we infer for Singapore, four markets to probably look at: intra-ASEAN market, ASEAN outbound travelers, and I'm going to talk to you about these numbers, why ASEAN outbound travelers of 2019 and 2018 are important to look at, and the inbound Muslim markets, the inbound ASEAN from the medium haul markets, and I'll take you through the numbers as well, and then ASEAN Muslim market in particular. So this, I think, which comes out through the report, that these are some of the areas to look at. Of course, innovation and empathy is critical in terms of marketing. And then there's this underlying health, confidence, and safety comes out everywhere. But I think Singapore has real strength in this area, and this could be also used in terms of promoting Singapore. So that's basically the report summary. So and this I think all of you know, but I thought it will be important for me to sort of contextualize the report that I talk about it. So as I said, we we were worried about different set of things last year, and coming to 2020, we are facing another set of problems. But I think most importantly, what's the future? What are the concerns that we have? So that's what the report is all about. So a report is, because there are so much of unknowns there, as I said in the beginning, we were not, contrary to our earlier reports, of course, which were a lot of based on surveys and then observations and recommendations. So this was more on frameworks and scenarios and models and tools. And as I said, we used ASEAN numbers to test those frameworks. So let me start with the first framework. So this is the main framework used in the report. So we looked at four sort of areas. One, what are the key drivers for travel readiness? So three drivers, I'm going to quickly talk about that. What are the different phases, both in terms of travel opening up and also in terms of recovery phases, which is related to COVID? And then based on these two, what are the scenarios in terms of travel recovery? So I think based on these, we have built some kind of scenarios here, and based on that, what are some other areas to look at in terms of recommendation? And we called it injectors because we are in the COVID world this year, but it's basically recommendations. So that's basically the report. So let me just quickly go through some of these four areas. So drivers. So we identified three key drivers for travel readiness. One is health management, travel economy, and understanding the behavior, consumer behavior. So these are the three areas that we looked at in the report. Of course, we did not do a lot of stuff on the health part of it in the report. It was mostly focused on understanding the travel economy and understanding the consumer behavior through some of the surveys that we did. As I said, also, it's a moving target, especially when it comes to consumer behavior. So in terms of the travel economy, and I think that's where it's probably interesting to look at. As I said, we looked at the ASEAN context. So ASEAN overall market in 2018 was worth about $300 billion, which was about 47% domestic, about 18% intra-ASEAN, and about 35% inbound ASEAN. That's the overall market. And if you see, because of course the report was not focusing on the Muslim market, but I thought in the ASEAN context, in this discussion, it's good to have a look. The Muslim market was worth about 50 or close to $60 billion, with about 51% domestic, 30 or 39 to 40% intra-ASEAN, and then about 10% inbound ASEAN. So that's the sort of a macro level picture of the ASEAN travel economy in 2018. Probably 2019, there was about 3 to 4% growth. But what's important from a Singapore context is to look at this set of numbers. So there were about 52 million outbound travelers from ASEAN, excluding Singapore. Singapore, I think, had about close to 10 million outbound in 2018, 2019. So if you exclude that number, you have about 52 million who went out of ASEAN countries in travel, 52 million trips, sorry. Out of that, there were about 6.5 million who came to Singapore. That's about 12.5% who came to Singapore out of these 52 million. Then if you look at the Muslim angle of it, about 28% of the 52 million were for Muslim travelers, about 15 million trips from Muslim travelers in ASEAN. And out of that, 20% came to Singapore. So if you look at this 6.5 and 3 million number, you see that the ASEAN arrivals, almost 46% are Muslim travelers, which is, I think, very important to identify. And this number, 3 million, is almost 90% of the Muslim travelers to Singapore. Outside of ASEAN, our numbers to Singapore are pretty low, actually, currently. So that I think this is an important fact to numbers to look at in the context I said in terms of short haul markets, because this 52 million, some of them went into ASEAN, but some of them, almost I think 30% probably, went outside of ASEAN. So that's a market to look at, because these people will be reluctant to go on medium haul or long haul trips, and they are probably the least impacted in terms of their household incomes. So that's the market probably to start looking at. So that's on the numbers part, and also in terms of consumer behavior, we did quite a bit of surveys on it, both us, Crescent Rating, and Mastercard. In the report, you have a lot more stuff. So we looked at in terms of the household income impact on Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, the shopping behaviors, dining, and all that. And we also looked at the top 8 or 9 inbound markets to ASEAN. There are basically, if you look across ASEAN, there are about 8 or 9 markets which are common across ASEAN, which is mainland China, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Australia. These are the 5 markets which is probably medium haul, and then you have USA, UK, and India. So these are the top sort of 8 markets coming into ASEAN. In terms of the behavior, consumer surveys that we have done, I think this is probably key. Confident about the economy is one of the key factors for travel recovery. I think there's, it comes across many other surveys that we have done as well. So that's probably one of the important things. And then in terms of, and again, those with high economic confidence are the ones who are, willing to either do domestic travel or even to some level international short haul and long haul travel. So I think I made a presentation separated to ASEAN team with much more details on that. If you want more surveys on this aspect, I can probably share with you. So that's so as I said, this was on the consumer behavior. So we looked at that, and also in terms of who are preferring domestic vacations, and who it comes out that only Singaporeans are willing to travel internationally at the moment. So that also comes down to confidence in the economy and all that. I think that's a fact that was again reiterated earlier. So that's a set of surveys. So that's about the drivers. So as I said, we looked at the different drivers, consumer behavior drivers, and the travel economy. Then we looked at what are the phases of travel. So we looked at 2 areas actually. One is in terms of travel opening up. So there are domestic travel opening up, travel bubbles, and intra-ASEAN, and hopefully inbound ASEAN as well. Apart from that, we also looked at 4 recovery phases to growth, which is containment, recovery, normalization, and growth. So containment was where I think Singapore was a couple of months ago, and many of the ASEAN countries as well. Restricted movements, the COVID situation was not very ideal, and most of the ASEAN countries are now coming into the recovery phase with gradual opening up of countries, services, and also some level of domestic travel opening. The hope is that then we can move into what we call a normalization phase, where there is some you won't have all the cures of COVID soon, but there is some good news about the cures. And then there'll be some opening up of intra-ASEAN travel, and then eventually to the growth phase. It's easy for me to draw here, but it's not guaranteed that we go from one phase to another in that manner. We have seen many times that many countries who are containment going into recovery and going back. Okay, so why I mentioned all that is to get you to the phases, the parts actually. So that's probably the most important part of our report. So this is what we simulated in terms of all that, taking into consideration the travel readiness drivers, in terms of taking into the market opening up in terms of the different domestic, intra, and regional, and also in terms of the phases: recovery, containment, normalization, and growth. So this report was released end of July, and at that time, our most positive scenario was that by the middle of 2021, the travel industry will recover, ASEAN will recover to about 94% of 2019. The plausible scenario at that time was 71% by 2019. The pessimistic scenario, 71% of 2019 by the middle of 2022. And the pessimistic scenario was it will only recover up to 31% by end of 2022. Having said that, as I said, it has been a moving target and it is now very different. And this was what our number when we looked at August in our simulations. So we said that was the most positive scenario, recovery of 71% by middle of 22. As we see now, the most positive scenario looks like the plausible scenario. Having said that, the pessimistic scenario is not out of the picture. That's a real possibility. And I think we need to make sure that businesses are ready in terms of these scenarios. So I think that's, especially when it comes to SMEs, are they looking at these scenarios and managing their cash, managing their cost? Because if not, they are in deep trouble. That's what I know we are trying to say through the report. So that's the parts, the drivers, phases, and parts, and then we had in the report some injectors. So in terms of understanding the gaps, what we used is one of the ways that we look at countries. So we actually look at, in terms of our other reports, in terms of ranking countries, we look at 4 areas in terms of access, communication, environment, and services. So we use the same model to understand what are the traveler strains, what are the destination constraints, and what we could do. Once again, this is not here are the answers to the problems. This is one way of looking at them, and one set of some sets of answers to some problems. But the idea was that we give some kind of a model so that you can understand, you can build your own traveler strains and constraints and start looking at what can be done to resolve those pains. In terms of this, I'm just going to focus on 2 things, just as an example. So we also have, I didn't mention in the beginning, we also have a consumer platform called Halal Trip. And in that, so what we were sort of thinking, okay, what do we do? How do you market? How do we do the marketing? And then one of the things that we came up with was understanding, what's empathy in this time, and then we, for making it easier, we came up with the 5 Fs, which is family. So I think that was something that every one of us missed. So it was family. It was we miss friends. All that, fearless, freedom, and there's a full article that we have written about this. So I think it's important to understand, and that's the message across this. It's important to understand what are the pain points that the consumer is having, and how do we cater to that through our content marketing. I think everybody's up in terms of let's give a discount and all that, but that will work to a certain extent. But at the end of the day, we need to understand their pain points and target those things properly. So so that was about I think this is pretty crucial. I think we have been doing other research as well, and also this whole thing about fulfillment is becoming so important. People are looking at the COVID has sort of reinvigorated the discussion on responsible tourism and things like that. So I think there's an angle to look at as well. Finally, I think for Singapore and ASEAN in particular, I think these 3 things are so important. Domestic market, of course, for many ASEAN countries, that's the only thing available right now. I went through the intra-ASEAN numbers as well, and from a Singapore point of view, I think there is definitely an angle to look at. Of course, intra-ASEAN in terms of short-haul markets, but also, as I mentioned, those ASEAN travelers who were doing long-haul or medium-haul trips during 2018-2019, they are definitely a target market to look at, because they are in all our, we have done research on the impact of household income in ASEAN countries, and they are, all of them are impacted, but they are least impacted when it comes to household income. And then I think, as I mentioned, inbound ASEAN, as I said, there are 8 countries who constitute about 45% visitors to ASEAN overall. And out of that, of course, UK, USA is problematic for the time being, and then India also. These are the other three markets. If you take those three markets out, you have mainland China, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and Australia. They account for about 37% of trips to ASEAN in 2019. So that's an interesting market to look at. And I told John this the same thing last when we discussed when we had the presentation to STB. I think some level of coordinated effort, ASEAN level coordinated effort to target these markets to ASEAN might also help in terms of bringing these visitors to this part of the world, including Singapore. So that's, I think, what I wanted to share. And finally, which I mentioned earlier as well, the ASEAN Muslim market is pretty big, and Singapore already has a good percentage of that market, but that market is and overall ASEAN is very Muslim friendly, so I think this market is not to be forgotten in the COVID context, and that market is worth almost as I said, close to $60 billion inbound and intra-ASEAN and domestic market. Muslim inbound market to ASEAN is very small, as you say, it's only 10%, so the two biggest markets are domestic and intra-ASEAN markets. That's briefly the report. I try to run through as quickly as I can. Yeah, so if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Very much. Very detailed. And as you mentioned, this was obviously within Southeast Asia, this is a major market for us. I believe, from my perspective, Singapore has a right to win and to really grow further into this market within Southeast Asia. Often we are not entirely aware of our shortcomings in our appeal to Muslim travelers. So I think reports like this help us to understand where we fall short and what else we can do. Any thoughts or questions from members of TRAC? John, anything you want to add?
No, if there's nothing, we can go on to the Southeast Asia presentation. TRAC members have any questions for Fazal?
Okay, and if not, then thanks very much, Fazal.
Thank you.